Hey again, everybody, back with a little bit more on colonial America and the New England colonies. The previous video showed how who the Pilgrims or Puritans were. The Puritan Pilgrims who settled up north wanted to separate from the Anglican Church because they thought it had was kind of beyond repair. But we'll continue seeing how these Puritans live in New England and look at some of the other colonies and what was unique among them, because they all end up being pretty different. It's kind of common groups of English settlers coming, but there's a lot of variation, just like people in South Carolina and New York are pretty different today overall. So we left off again with our Puritans, the people who wanted a more Protestant version of the Church of England and wanted to come to the American colonies to settle new communities with their religious ideals. So these are religious communities, they're family oriented, they're not commercial based agricultural enterprises like we had in the Chesapeake area. So again, we got Plymouth, where the Pilgrims landed in 1620 there, and then more Puritans come to settle the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is based just a little bit farther north of here in 1630. So both groups have similar religious values and ideals. Both are along the Puritan faith. As far as what I described about that in the previous video lecture, but now these people, the ones in Plymouth, were coming kind of as spiritual pilgrims. The ones up in Boston or Massachusetts Bay are coming to start new lives, but also have similar religious values. One of the leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony is a guy named John Winthrop. And just to kind of show you this religious fervor that was in New England, he talked about Boston and the Massachusetts Bay Colony being a city on a hill, reference from the Bible, but both Democratic presidents and Republican presidents have referred to this. John Kennedy and Ronald Reagan wanting the United States to reflect this same mentality of a city on a hill, meaning something that sets an example for others to see. These people, again, are not out to live up here and take over large chunks of land like the ones in Jamestown or make millions for themselves. They wanted to set an example in their lives. And sometimes those things look to us like they get out of hand, but ultimately they're so driven by their faith, they want to ensure that others in their community are living up to that standard as well. Just a second, please. Oops, sorry. Well, maybe I said I would come back. Someone came to my office door. So now I'm back. Okay, so John Winthrop talked about New England being a city on a hill. Well, Anne Hutchinson is really the first woman in the American colonies who draws a lot of fanfare. She is one who lives in Massachusetts Bay, but you know, as I mentioned before, in the Puritan Church or the Protestant Church, the sermons were really important to emphasize God's Word. So she wanted to start holding Bible studies in her home, and a lot of people came to those, and they would kind of reflect upon the more recent sermon message on living by God's grace. But a big problem is because she's also teaching men in her home, and the Protestants thought that men were supposed to be doing the teaching. So Hutchinson is basically put on a trial, and Winthrop is there, and they're questioning her about her beliefs on God's grace, because these people they're very concerned with theology, and they don't want someone leading others astray. Finally she says that God himself had told her to host these things and come to the New World, and that scares the authorities, because they said, well, it can't be God speaking to you directly, it has to be the devil. So she is kicked out of Massachusetts Bay. So basically, again, with these ideals, they don't always show an understanding. However, these colonies were set up so that people could live according to those ideals. So, you kind of have to look at it from both sides to say, oh my gosh, that seems really extreme. She has differing views, and so she's kicked out of the colony. But these colonies set themselves up so that people would have the same views. So she's kicked out, goes to Connecticut, where her family is later killed by Indians. So, not a very good ending for Anne Hutchinson. Another person kicked out of Massachusetts Bay is going to be Roger Williams. Williams, so again, he's an immigrant, moves over from England to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He writes this thing. It looks like Bloudy, but it's that was how they spelled bloody. Tenet of persecution. This document is going to become really foundational to the American idea of separation of church and state. The what it does here, his views start to evolve, and so he starts to think, well, it's not fair for the government to tell me what I can believe. And so what he does, this is really the first document in American history that argues for the separation of church and state. So what Roger Williams is saying is that the state government, the government of the colony, shouldn't be able to persecute people based on their religious beliefs. So he's kicked out of Massachusetts Bay because those people largely disagree. And then he goes to found Providence, which becomes Rhode Island in 1636. So separation of church and state, that idea first originates with Roger Williams in the American colonies. All right, so the New England colonies are all kind of based on religion. So again, when we're talking New England, it's kind of this little square up here, these northernmost colonies. So Massachusetts Bay, very Puritan-oriented, Plymouth Puritan-oriented, Rhode Island, people with divergent views, like Roger Williams, who they end up being fair to people like Native Americans and offering them money. Connecticut, not quite as religious. What happens here in Connecticut is you've got the Connecticut River, so there's some good land. So a lot of people who aren't quite as religiously fervent move down to Connecticut to kind of get away from the strict religious rules in Massachusetts Bay. New Haven is even stricter. That's where Yale is today. Today it's in the state of Connecticut. But New Haven, as a colony, was very devout and strict in terms of what they believed and enforcing that. So here are New England colonies. Let's look at some of the other colonies. I mentioned Maryland, so it's one of the Chesapeake colonies. Wrote that on the board one day in class. So you have Maryland and Virginia on this Chesapeake Bay. Maryland, the intent was for it to be a Catholic haven. So just like the Protestants up in New England got a haven, Catholics weren't being treated great either, because if they weren't in the Church of England. So Lord Baltimore, Maryland, the colony is named for Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, who was a Catholic queen in the 1500s. So this was the intent, for it to be a refuge for the English Catholics, just as Plymouth was a refuge for the Puritans. But that doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't is because all of these money-greedy people in colonial Virginia, once tobacco had become key, they all start flooding up and taking the land in Maryland. So Maryland becomes a lot like Virginia in terms of being driven by tobacco and money. Pennsylvania is very unique. It means Penn's Forest, started by the Quakers. And the Quakers were a unique group, a small religion. Their official name is the Society of Friends. So, not the most threatening group name there, but the Society of Friends. They stayed at a Quaker inn one time in England, and all the name tags of the employees said Friend John, Friend Susan, Friend Jane. So they call themselves Friends, and it's a very egalitarian, we spell egalitarian for those of you not less You're less spelling inclined. So the Quakers are very egalitarian, meaning equal amongst classes. A lot of the times when they're speaking, they're mocked for saying thee, thou, thy, and what they were doing by using those words is kind of making fun of people who thought you should speak differently to someone just because they're in a different social class. They also allow women to speak openly in their meetings. There's not a head pastor or anything, so whoever feels led by the Spirit can speak, and that scares a lot of people that women and other people who are not trained are allowed to have the authority to speak there in meetings. So they get permission to start a colony, and what this means is that, kind of like Rhode Island, the Quakers are very open. They're a minority religion, they're very egalitarian, so tends to be a safer colony for Native Americans to kind of hide out in, but also a lot of smaller religions like the Amish, who still largely live in Pennsylvania, Mennonites, German groups start to settle in Pennsylvania. So when you hear the phrase the Pennsylvania Dutch, it's not Dutch like people from the Netherlands, but it's a play on the Pennsylvania Deutsch, because there were so many Germans who settled in Pennsylvania. The Carolinas, we were, hang on, I lost my little, am I still filming? I better still be filming. Alright, pause for a moment, because I need, there it is. Well, I guess we'll go on. The Carolinas, we were actually founded as one colony in the late 1600s, named for King Charles II. Used to always wonder growing up why, because I thought Carolina doesn't sound like Charles whatsoever, but it's all from the Latin roots. Latin for Charles is Carolus. That's why Carol is considered the female equivalent of the name Charles. So Carolina means land of Charles. Charlestown, Charleston, named for him. And what happens is that you've got two very distinct regions. South Carolina will grow more quickly and rapidly. The problem with North Carolina is you've got the Outer Banks here, so you've got barrier islands, not easy port access except way down south at Wilmington. So due to the fact that there's not easy port access, but you've got places like Charleston that have great port access, that's going to be one of the major factors, because shipping is so important, and that's how you get people there. So North Carolina is going to be much slower to develop. South Carolina, I almost thought I had a different slide up there, will grow, and there's several things that grow in those coastal regions more, such as indigo, some sugar, but what becomes a major crop for South Carolina will be rice. Slaves brought to South Carolina will grow rice as they did in West Africa, and you still see lots of rice paddies and rice fields down some of the coastal places, but slavery will unfortunately grow pretty rapidly in South Carolina among a very elite group of people who own a lot of slaves who settle in that area. Georgia is a unique little place. Started by James Oglethorpe. You got Oglethorpe University down there. And, you know, people will say, or you might hear a reference to criminals starting Georgia. Oglethorpe's intention was for Georgia to be settled by debtors. There was debtor prison in England in the 1700s. So if you owed debts, you could be put in debtor's prison. And so the reference to criminals starting it is that was Oglethorpe's ideal, because the opportunities were not supposed to be widespread for people in Georgia to kind of reach a personal fortune. Its purpose was a military barrier from Spanish Florida. So you still had the Spaniards down here. Now you've got wealthy Charleston up here. So there were a lot of conditions originally that the Georgians were supposed to face. They weren't allowed to have slaves. Slaves could be persuaded by the Spanish to lead a revolt. The Spanish could promise slaves freedom in Florida if they did that. so no slaves originally. Smaller plots of land. You didn't want a plot of land that was so large that you couldn't alert your neighbor quickly if you saw the Spanish approaching. So some practical things, but as soon as Oglethorpe left, then naturally the greed took over that we've already seen some, and those things are undone, and Georgia is going to become a plantation colony as well. I'll stop this segment here for now and post another one later.